Hello, welcome to the Pitcher Nail Down. I'm Big Italy 42. He's Scott Mayo. We got Sports 25 to life, and talking about the state of arms today. All these guys on the mound. We've got some expensive options, some cheap options, some chalky options, and then maybe some guys that you and I like that other people aren't on quite as much. So we'll start at the top with the most popular. We assume the most popular play of the day. That's Garrett Cole, third most expensive on DraftKings and second most expensive on FanDuel. Facing off against an Arizona team that, much different offense on the road than they are at home. And obviously this game's got a low total of 7 runs, and Cole is a huge favorite, mostly because Jeremy Hellickson's on the other side, and we know how bad Jeremy Hellickson is against everyone. So you assume he'll get run support, and he should have a fine game. But, hasn't pitched great recently. But with that being said, he still might be one of the safer options on the slate.
Yeah. I think Cole's, definitely the most likely for a win here. Hellickson's just been terrible. He's allowing a 194 ISO to everyone. Yeah. It's just bad. But yeah, it's hard to argue with Cole. He's been advanced statistics wise really good. He hasn't had a ton of great matchups lately. He's been a little bit inconsistent. Pirates offense hasn't been great behind him, but he's a guy with a decent amount of upside, especially at that price. Strikeout potential, can pitch deep into games. We saw a stretch of 4 games in a row where he went at least 7 2/3 innings during July. The guy can do it all. He just hasn't been lately. I like him quite a bit tonight. He's not my favorite pitcher. I think Cole Hamels is probably my favorite pitcher. It's in Texas tonight for Hamels, but he's facing a Seattle team that we've mentioned a few times isn't very good against lefties outside of Nelson Cruz. You obviously have to be scared of Nelson Cruz in that lineup, no matter who's on the mound. But at 10-5, Hamels is a decent favorite at -130. It's an 8.5 over-under, but I have that a lot of those runs on the Texas side of things. I think Hamels is my favorite play in both GPPs and cash games tonight because of ownership percentage, really. Like you mentioned, Cole's going to be the most popular option. He's a massive favorite at -220. He's the same price as Hamels. I think he's going to dominate the ownership percentage, and that's going to make Hamels a great play in both. Obviously, he hasn't been great since he came to Texas, but I don't see anything particularly wrong with him. His advanced stats aren't that bad. He just hasn't been dominant by any means. Given up 9 runs in the 2 games, but he's gone 6 and 7 2/3 innings. Given up some hits, walking a couple guys here and there. There's a lot of things you can nitpick about him, but I still think he's a really solid pitcher. He's got a great offense behind him. He's facing a team with a bunch of lefties in the lineup, especially in the middle of it, with some of its best hitters in Cano and Seager. So Hamels is the way I'm going to go quite a bit tonight.
Yeah, and that's a good call. He's the second highest strikeout rate of anybody on the board. By far the highest soft hit percentage, highest swing strike rate. So a lot of good things going for him. Maybe some people will be scared off him because Seattle has been hitting well, but like you mentioned, it's lefty-lefty for most of these guys. So not a lot of these guys hit lefties very well. Other options, you got Michael Wacha against the Giants. He's $9,200 on FanDuel. On DraftKings, he's 10-1. Probably a little pricier than I like on DraftKings, and he's not a guy that's showing a ton of upside, but he's been consistent over his last 3 games. He's given up 2 earned runs combined in those 3 games. One was Colorado on the road, one was Pittsburgh, one was at Cincinnati, so not exactly a gauntlet of tough matchups for him. But since the beginning of the season, he wasn't striking out many batters early. Now he's starting to turn that around. Doesn't give up a whole lot of hard contact. Doesn't give up a lot of base runners. His biggest weakness, I guess you would say, is that he's been fairly inconsistent. But he's been much better at home than he has on the road. Really just no glaring weakness outside the fact that the Giants are a top 5 offense against righties.
Yeah, definitely. I have no problems with Wacha. I don't love the price there just because the strikeouts have been so down this year. That's the one thing that's a drawback for me is that he just hasn't been a great strikeout pitcher this year. Another guy that I think is going to be crazy low in the GPPs tonight, Sonny Gray, is kind of interesting against Baltimore, who have the highest strikeout rate over the last month. it's hard to really love anyone against Baltimore right now because their lineup has just been on fire. But I mean, there's a lot of upside there. If Gray's pitching well and Baltimore doesn't have a solid game at the plate, I mean, like I said, they can't strike out a ton. They've gone cold at times this year. Obviously, they have a ton of bats you want to avoid in their lineup with Chris Davis, Adam Jones. I mean, Parra has been great in the 2-hole for them since he was acquired. Machado's obviously a stud in the leadoff spot. So, I mean, it's going to be one of those things where Gray's probably, I don't know, less than 5% owned tonight. And he's been one of the, I mean, he's quietly been one of the best pitchers in the major leagues if you're looking at advanced stats only. I mean, he hasn't been like an elite guy in terms of racking up strikeouts, but I mean, we saw him go out against Houston last time out and throw 9 innings of 1-run ball. He only had 5 strikeouts in that game. That's on the back of a 7-inning outing against Cleveland where he gave up 1 run, and then another complete game against a really tough Dodgers lineup where he struck out 9 guys and shut them out. I mean, the guy's been absolutely fantastic, and he kind of flies under the radar, especially in matchups like this where I really think he's an ace. And it's a little bit tough because, I mean, Oakland's offense hasn't been great this year. They have a lot of guys struggling right now. And so he just constantly flies under the radar. I'm thinking like 3 to 5% owned tonight on DraftKings, at least at 11.9. And he's a small favorite in this one. At Baltimore isn't my favorite thing in the world because they have a lot of lefty bats, and lefties hit a ton of home runs there. But I really love him as a GPP play tonight.
Yeah, that's a really good call. And I think people may be scared off because he was pushed back, was supposed to start Thursday originally.
Yep.
But obviously, I mean, he's by far the best pitcher they have. They're not going to be out there risking his health, you know, if he's not ready to go. And I like that call a lot. I mean, you mentioned those complete games. He got 3 of them in his last 6 starts. So, I mean, he certainly has the upside there. Even if he's not striking out a lot of guys, especially DraftKings-wise. You know, maybe that's why his price is so inflated, because he does have that. You can get the shutout bonus, complete game shutout bonus. You know, and especially because, I mean, he's $1,100 more than anyone. So his ownership's going to be so low. I'm with you. I'm a big fan. And there's plenty of value where you can fit this guy in as well.
Right, definitely on DraftKings. I mean, it's tough to select him as your only pitcher on FanDuel. It really is. Yeah. And it's going to make him super low on there as well. So it's hard not to like him as GPP play there. But like you said on DraftKings, you can get a cheaper pitcher who I'm sure we're going to talk about a couple of these guys in a second here and still get a pretty solid hitting lineup. I mean, 11.9 is like nothing for a top pitcher price at this point. I mean, we've seen 15K from guys like Scherzer and Kershaw. I mean, you can get other bats in your lineup with a guy that's 11.9. It's not a crazy price, but it looks higher than it is because of how cheap the other relative aces are on this slate.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And first one of those guys, if we're talking upside cheap guys, I like Carlos Rodon. You certainly don't think that he's going to go out and dominate this team quite like he did last time. 11 strikeouts, 4 hits, 1 walk, and 7 scoreless innings last time out. But, I mean, this is a guy that does have significant strikeout upside. He had 9 against Cleveland, 4 starts back. And he's certainly not without risk, because also in his last 6 starts last 5, he has an 8 earned run performance in 3 innings, a 7 earned run in 4 innings. But this is an Angels team that's been one of the worst offenses in baseball over the past month. And, you know, you're really only worried about Trout and Pujols, neither one of them producing at a high level right now. And, I mean, if you can manage to navigate those 2 guys, there's not a single other bat in that lineup that you're worried about, especially as a left-handed pitcher, because that kind of takes out Cole Calhoun out of the situation for the most part. So I like him quite a bit. He's a risky play, but he's got, I mean, probably the highest upside of any of these cheap guys.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's the only other guy that I would consider that has that kind of upside among these cheap guys is Brian Mitchell for the Yankees. And with him coming out of the bullpen most of the year, I mean, there's a lot of concern with innings that caps his upside. But that guy can rack up strikeouts. I think he's at 10.1 Ks per 9, which is like really solid. Obviously, it's a little bit easier to do that out of the bullpen. But, I mean, we've seen him throw in long relief a couple times already. He's pitched 3 innings in each of the last 2 outings. He made a start and went 4 innings and struck out 5 guys against the White Sox a couple weeks ago. I mean, the guy has a lot of strikeout potential. He's super cheap because he's coming out of the bullpen. I think he's only $4,900 on DraftKings. He is 53 on FanDuel.
46.
Right? Oh, 46 on FanDuel, too.
Yeah.
Okay. So, yeah, I mean, he's ridiculously cheap, has a lot of strikeout upside. like I said, I can't see him going more than 5 innings in this one. I mean, if he was ridiculously efficient, maybe six, but as a guy that throws a lot of pitches to get strikeouts, I don't see him getting past the fifth inning.
Yeah, but and you say that you figure that's kind of built into the price, but at the same time,
Yeah.
CC Sabathia was originally supposed to pitch today, so maybe people looked last night who was going to pitch, kind of made their tentative lineups around it. Probably didn't even consider the guy because you weren't expecting him to start.
Right.
So, I mean, that and the fact that he should get some run support. So if he can get through those 5 innings, maybe he gets you a cheap win. And Minnesota's been the worst road offense in all of baseball this year, so
Yeah.
definitely not a tough matchup for him at all.
Yeah, there's a lot to like there. The innings are really the only thing that concerns me. I think he's going to give you a solid 4, 5, 6 innings. The question is whether it's worth it to you if you only get that four. Because I mean, even if he goes 4 innings and strikes out 6 guys, he can't get the win. He's only got 4 innings worth of points. I mean, that makes it kind of tough. But it's built into his price, like you said. I mean, he's ridiculously cheap on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Another guy who's cheap that doesn't have upside, but you feel like it's going to be relatively safe due to the matchup. Matt Garza, not a pitcher that I like in general, but you look over his past 5 starts, 5 straight quality starts. He hasn't had more than 5 Ks in any of them, 4 or 5 in each one. But he's been pitching 6, 7 innings each of 5 for the last 5. And this is a Miami team that has no power. They just are not a good offense. So it's $6,100 on DraftKings as your SP2. I think you do much worse. I feel like he's probably safer than Rodon. Obviously nowhere near the upside, but
Yeah.
as a secondary cash game option, I don't think he's that bad tonight.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. Another guy that he's a little bit pricier than him, but Chris Heston against the Cardinals. I mean, the Cardinals' offense is pretty good. Heston hasn't been quite as good lately, but he's kind of an interesting play here. I mean, we see the Cardinals struggle at times. Heston is a guy that we know has a ton of upside. I mean, he's pitched deep into games multiple times this year. He's got a few double-digit strikeout games on the year. There's a lot to like here at 7,300 outside of the fact that the Cardinals have Waka on the mound, and it's going to be tough to get the win there because I do think Waka has a nice game tonight against San Francisco. But Heston seems a little bit underpriced on DraftKings at 7,300.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, his one small weakness is lefties, but he's done much better over the past month or so with them. He was struggled a lot at the beginning of the season. So, I don't mind that. And people don't tend to target pitchers against the Cardinals, like you said, so he'll have low ownership as well. And if you want the really cheap guy, $3,000 on FanDuel, 48 on DraftKings. Colin Ray, first performance. He struggled a little bit in 5 innings, gave up 3 earned runs, but did have 4 strikeouts. A decent return, more so on FanDuel, where you're obviously only losing points for earned runs. And where he's $3,000, and we're talking like he's a mid-range third baseman at that price.
Yeah.
So, I mean, incredibly cheap, very little risk. And this is a guy that put up ridiculous numbers in the minor leagues this year. He had like an ERA around 1, a whip of like 0.8, something like that. I mean, so he's not a guy you're expecting to pitch deep in the game and give you a huge performance. But if you're trying to get some big bats in your lineup tonight, then you just go ahead and slot him in on FanDuel for your GPP and do whatever the hell you feel like doing everywhere else.
Yeah, I mean, he gave us 5 solid innings with 4 strikeouts in his first game against Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I think you can expect something probably pretty similar again today. I mean, Atlanta's not a scary offense. I mean, it would be nice to see a couple more strikeouts if he's only throwing 5 innings worth of pitches, but I mean, we'll see how that goes. I mean, he's really, really cheap. A pretty solid favorite at -150. There's a ton to like there as a cheap guy, too. And then the last guy that I'm really considering, where'd he go? Oh, Chris Tillman is a guy that I'm going to look at. He's a really small favorite against Oakland. We mentioned Oakland's really been struggling. His matchup with Gray is obviously concerning a little bit because he's going to have to keep runs way down to get a win in this one. But he didn't look great in his first return start from injury, but 5 of 6 games before he got hurt, he looked like a guy that was the top prospect that he was for the longest time.
Yep.
And, I mean, we saw him go 8 2/3 against Atlanta and strike out 4 guys. We saw him go 7 innings against Tampa Bay. He's not a massive strikeout guy, but he was pitching really deep into games. If he can get that back, I mean, he's a value at 5,500 on DraftKings for sure. I like some of these other guys we've mentioned a little bit more, but I don't mind him as a GPP play just because of how much Oakland's been struggling, and he's just too cheap.
Yeah, and like you said, I mean, he's been a good pitcher before. He just struggled a lot
Yeah.
at the beginning of the season. So the one other guy I'll mention, because he does have huge upside, and everyone's going to be scared off this matchup because Boston has been on fire. But Danny
Yeah.
Salazar, I mean, we know he has by far the highest strikeout rate of any pitcher on the board today, 28.1%. Does struggle a little bit with home runs, which, is obviously concerning pitching at Fenway. And you look at the numbers, I mean, Boston over the past 14 days, 207 team ISO, 377 team WOBA. I mean, they're getting production from everywhere. I mean, their 9-hitter Jackie Bradley has been one of the hotter hitters in the entire world right now. So, top to bottom, they're dominating. But I think that's not to say that I'm just expecting him to go out and throw a gem. But, this is still a Boston Red Sox team that's beatable. They haven't been consistently good offense at all this year. So, at probably, what do you say, at least less than 10%. Probably even lower than that on FanDuel. I think
For the guy with the highest strikeout upside, for sure. I mean, it's pretty hard to argue with. I mean, I prefer him a little bit at his price on FanDuel more, and I think he's probably going to be lower owned there because it's only one pitcher. But yeah, I have a hard time arguing with that for GPPs. I think you can say a lot of similar things about Andrew Heaney tonight too. The White Sox offense has been better of late. Heaney hasn't been great of late, but he was red hot when he first started making starts this season. I mean, he has a little bit of upside. Not a massive strikeout guy, but a guy that can give you 6 or 7 strikeouts in 7 innings. He was pitching deep into games. So there's some nice combined upside there between the innings and the strikeouts. The White Sox have been better lately, but they haven't been great against lefties outside of Jose Abreu. So I think that's an interesting play. He's really the only guy priced in that price range on DraftKings at 9,000. So it makes it kind of an interesting play because if you play him, you're going to end up with teams that aren't similar to what other people have, which is something that interests me in GPPs for sure.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, he could just go out there every ninth batter and just go ahead and throw 4 balls to Jose Abreu, maybe make it easier on himself tonight.
That would be nice.
Yeah, that's what I would be doing if I was him facing Jose Abreu tonight. So I'll throw out one more guy that could be an interesting option. He hasn't been a great pitcher this year, but he's shown some upside at times. Erasmo Ramirez. It's a Houston team that strikes out a ton against right-handed pitching. Erasmo Ramirez, obviously not a big strikeout guy, but 19% is fine. He doesn't give up a lot of home runs, 0.73 per 9. Does a pretty good job of keeping the ball on the ground, almost 50% ground ball rate. So while this is a very dangerous team that has a lot of good hitters top to bottom, they also swing it. They are also a lot of free swingers here. So, if he could pitch deep, which he's done quite a few times, pitched about 7 innings, then I don't think he's a bad cheap option. But certainly not one without risk. You're playing him, hoping he gives you a quality start at low ownership, essentially.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, that's going to wrap things up here. Find us on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and check out all of our great content at dailyfantasycafe.com.